All right, let's talk about the high stakes world of US government contracting. We're talking about a place where there are literally billions of dollars on the table. But to get a piece of that pie, you have to navigate this absolute maze of rules and regulations. And honestly, it feels like it was designed to make you fail. So, let's see if we can find a way through it together. So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get a feel for the maze itself, just how complicated it is. Then, I'm going to show you a kind of map that promises a clear path through. We'll look at some real-world examples to uncover some of the hidden traps lurking in there. We'll see how this applies to literally everything, from shoeing horses to upgrading hospitals. And finally, we'll talk about why, in the end, clarity is your greatest weapon. Okay, so let's set the stage here. The US government is the single biggest buyer of, well, everything in the world. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars every single year. The opportunity is just massive. But the whole process is run by this notoriously complicated rulebook. And that complexity, it's not a bug, it's a feature. And that brings us to the fundamental problem every contractor has to deal with. On the one hand, you've got the promise of these amazing, stable, lucrative government projects. But on the other hand, you've got the reality, a giant wall of text, this jungle of regulations where just one tiny misdetail, one misinterpreted sentence can get your entire bid tossed in the trash before anyone even looks at it. So, how in the world do you get through that? Well, this is where our map comes in. We're going to look at a tool from Gaen Tech called the FAR Clarity Intelligence Brief. It's designed to do just one thing, but it's a really important thing, to translate that dense, confusing wall of text into a simple, clear, actionable path forward. Let's dig in and see how it works. The whole system is actually built on this really elegant three-part structure. So first, you've got the original requirement, pulled word for word from the government document. Then, in the middle, it translates that into a simple, plain English action. Do this. But here's the secret sauce, the third column, the risk analysis. This part tells you why it matters. It's basically a decoder ring for government speak. And you're going to see this term FAR a lot. It stands for Federal Acquisition Regulation. You should just think of it as the official rulebook, the Bible, really, for all government buying. It's the source code for that entire wall of text we've been talking about. And you absolutely have to understand it. Okay, theory is one thing, but let's see how this tool actually holds up out in the wild. We're going to walk through a few real-life government contracts and see what kind of hidden traps it can sniff out. The kind of traps that could literally sink a company's bid. First up, we're headed to Puerto Rico. The Air Force has a contract out to repair an air traffic control tower. It's a pretty standard construction job, replace some windows, some railings, and a couple of fire escape ladders. Seems simple enough, right? Well, buried deep inside an updated version of the statement of work was this one tiny but absolutely critical detail. The original document asked for 2 new ladders. The new one adds a third. Now, the action it generates is simple enough. Make sure your materials list has 3 ladders, not the original 2. But the implication of that action? That's where things get really interesting. See, this isn't just a minor change. The brief flags this as what it calls a ghosting opportunity. Think about it. Any competitor who missed that update, who's still working off the old document, they're going to bid the job with only 2 ladders. They'll come in with a lower price, they'll probably win the contract, and then they'll be completely stuck when they realize they can't do the work for the price they quoted. That tiny detail just became a massive competitive advantage. All right, next up, this one's for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and it seems almost laughably simple. They just need to check a company's past references. It's just paperwork. What could possibly go wrong? The process is straightforward. The VA sends you a questionnaire. You're supposed to give that questionnaire to your past clients, your references, so they can fill it out and send it back to the contracting officer at the VA. So the action from the brief is also simple. Write the email for your reference, attach the file, and then remind them to send it in. Notice you, the company bidding, you don't even send the final email. And here's the trap. This is what the brief calls an administrative failure point. If your reference, someone who doesn't even work for your company, forgets to send that email, or maybe sends it to the wrong person, your proposal automatically gets a neutral rating. And in the world of government contracting, a neutral rating is, and I love this quote, statistically fatal. Game over. You lose the contract because of something you had no direct control over. Crazy, right? Okay, one last one. This time, we're at Fermilab, which is the Department of Energy's premier particle physics lab. They need to repair the concrete on the outside of their iconic main building, Wilson Hall. It's a huge, complex job, and you'd think the risks would be obvious, but the biggest one? It's hidden in the work schedule. Here it is. This one line changes everything. The document says that all noisy construction, so drilling, hammering, you name it, is restricted to the hours between 5 p.m. and dark. The action is crystal clear. You cannot price this job using standard 9-to-5 labor rates. You have to bid using more expensive second shift, evening rates. And you have to add in the cost of lighting the entire site. I mean, the financial hit here is huge. If you miss that one line about work hours, your entire bid is built on a lie. You'd propose a price thinking you're going to make a nice profit, but those required shift work upcharges would absolutely destroy your margin. This insight alone could save a company from bidding on a project they were guaranteed to lose money on. Now, it's easy to think these kinds of gotcha moments only happen in these huge, multi-million-dollar projects. But the truth is, this level of complexity is everywhere. I mean, just look at the sheer range of stuff the government buys. On one end of the scale, you have a contract from the USDA Forest Service. The job? They need a farrier, someone to put shoes on their horses and mules. The brief gives this a cyber complexity score of 0 out of 100. I mean, it's about as low-tech and straightforward as a job can get. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, a contract from the Indian Health Service to replace a hospital's fire alarm system. The brief gives this an 85 out of 100 on the cyber complexity score. And you might ask, why? It's a fire alarm. Well, it's because that new system has to be integrated into existing secure IT networks, it has to use government-approved encryption, and it has to be hosted on a secure cloud platform. Suddenly, what looks like a simple construction job is actually a high-stakes IT project in disguise. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? After seeing these hidden traps and these clever opportunities, what's the real power of being able to find clarity in the middle of all this complexity? Well, it really boils down to this. This kind of analysis transforms that bureaucratic nonsense into simple, plain English. It shines a massive spotlight on those hidden risks and those fatal administrative traps that are designed to make you fail. But it's not just about playing defense. It actively finds strategic openings to outsmart your competition. And, maybe most importantly, by making the rules clear and understandable for everyone, it levels the playing field. So businesses can compete based on how good they are, not just on how many lawyers they can afford. Which really leaves us with one final question to think about. We're all basically drowning in information, in complexity, in jargon every single day. In a world like that, what is the ultimate competitive advantage? Maybe it's not more data or more money, but something much simpler: clarity.